Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the MR Aerodesigns PC-6 Pilatus turboporter aircraft. I realize that right now I probably look like a little head in front of a massive table, which is kind of the case, but build video number 1 of this aircraft. Let's roll that intro and we'll get started. Alright guys, so in this video we are going to be, at least right now, we're going to be starting with constructing the ailerons and elevator surfaces. The reason we need to get the aileron and elevator surfaces constructed is because we need them to properly line up the wing. Now these plans are a little bit odd, and the only reason I know this is because there's another fellow close that's building one of these, and he's a little bit ahead of us. Aaron and the owner of this plane, they've gone through some discussions and things like that about how to properly fix the wing plans or fix the wing build per se of this plane. So basically what it is the simplest way to explain it is the plan listed as right, you build the left wing on. The plan listed as left, you build the right wing on, but it's very helpful to have the aileron and elevator surfaces made to make sure all the hinges and control rods line up. And then we have to swap some of the formers and things like that, so the ribs. Anyways, guys, going to start with building the aileron of this wing, and so building 2 ailerons obviously and 2 elevators or flaps. So guys, if I encounter anything interesting or tips or anything along the way, I will tell you, and I will kind of show you my process here of how it's going. So just one more plug here for the magnetic table. So I've covered the plan in plastic and just used small magnets here to hold it down, but works great for those things, so you can just lay down magnets all over the place and everything is nicely held down and works great. Guys, we're just going to take a quick pause in the video, in the assembly, and wish Luna a happy birthday. It's her 2nd birthday today, and we are absolutely in love with her. She is the best dog we have ever had. She's absolutely phenomenal. She's a great shop dog. And she loves coming to the flying field because she just chillaxes and she's so well-mannered. So, happy birthday, Luna. She doesn't know, but it's her 2nd birthday today. All right, guys, I was working on the aileron this morning. Got the main aileron cut out. The 2 end pieces are glued in, and we've got most of the other ribs sitting there. So, just a couple things to figure out here with the control horns. Now, one thing with the control horn that I'm not overly excited about is the stock setup. So right now these ribs are spaced out properly as per the plan, and you can see there we've obviously got a fairly big gap in between the pieces of wood and the control surface. Now that's probably okay. I was just putting this together. This is the wrong nut, but I was just using it to hold it all together. So what I'm probably going to do here, guys, is put one of these nuts on each side of the control horn, the ball joint, and then tighten the nylon lock nut down on this side, and that's going to prevent the ball joint from moving side to side. It'll take up any slack that it has, and it should work good. So I'll show you guys that a little bit later on, but that should make sense there. All right, guys, you can see the exact same setup here, but we've got 2 nuts installed, spacing out the control rod or control ball joint, and this just makes for a way more solid connection. And then we just put a nylon lock nut on that side. So it makes more sense to do it this way, and then we've got more support in this structure as well too. If we don't put those nuts in there, then these pieces can move side to side a lot easier, and it's just not as good of a setup. Morning, guys, welcome back to day 2. We are continuing with the PC-6 turboporter build. Today I think what I'm going to start off with is the flap of the right wing plan. So we've done the aileron of the right wing plan. We're going to go to the flap of the right wing plan. Once that's done, then we'll go to the left wing. That's the plan for today. Let's see how much we can accomplish. The goal is to get all 4 surfaces done 100%, so shaped and everything. We'll see what we can do, but let's dive into this. All right, guys, you asked for detail, so we will show you the detail. I will build this aileron step by step. We'll keep it very short and sweet, and we'll follow the plans here on how to build it. So basically what I've done with each of these surfaces is set aside all the parts. First step was to cut out the piece of balsa, which I've showed you already, obviously making sure it's square. And now we've got a piece that is the right size for the bottom of the surface. So next thing I did was take the piece of balsa, line it up with the edge of the trailing edge on the plans. So get that nice and lined up. Use magnets, again, another plug for a magnet table. No, I don't own any stocks of magnets. So you can use the magnets to hold it down. And then all I do is take my ruler, run it across the rib line, and then just take a really sharp pencil. And when that's done, all of our rib holes and lines that we need to cut out on the balsa are marked. Now what I do is I will measure the distance on the plans from the trailing edge to where that hole starts, and I think it's 60 millimeters and 83 millimeters, and I will mark that in each of the cutouts and get those cut out. All right, guys, all the cutouts are done on the piece of balsa. So now what I'll do is I'm going to start using my magnets, and basically I want to assemble this thing right side up because that's the way I've done the other side, but we've got to put it together upside down. So all I've been doing is taking this, flipping it over, so making sure we've got the right pieces going in the right spot, and we'll leave a little bit of excess, what is this, 1/4 by 1/2 or something like that, and we'll insert like that. And then what I'm doing at this point is I'm taking magnets, I'm going to lay them down in this corner, and they're going to go right on the edge of this. Right like that. So now our outside rib is right on the proper line, and we're held in place with magnets. So you don't really need to use any more magnets on this thing because all we're doing is using this to get the ribs in the right spot. So what I'll do next is I'm just going to go and I will put the other ply ribs on, which are these 4 and the one on the end. Once those are done, then I will put the balsa ply ribs on, and then we'll have everything assembled. Okay, so with those ribs on, now we've got to put the control surface ribs together. And when we put these together, like I showed previously, we are adding the nuts in between the ball joint and then the plywood on the outside of that. So let's throw this together and I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so with that assembled, This is a lot more sturdy, everything is square, and just is a better idea in my opinion. The manual shows not having those nuts in place, but right now with those nuts in place, everything's nice and tight. The ball joint doesn't have any play with the bolt going through it, and it's just a better way of doing things in my opinion. We've all got opinions. So with this being done, we can install this on the rib. All right, so all of our ribs are installed. Next thing we'll do is install the sheet. Okay, so with the sheet installed, nothing's glued in place right now, but what we can do is we can flip this over and take a look at things. All right, so we are all installed as far as the ribs go and everything. Next thing we have to do is we've got to glue all of the ribs onto the underside. All right, so the one thing I didn't show you in the instructions was step number 2, which is gluing these 1/64 pieces of ply onto the ply. So I'll just show you quickly how I do that. So I've got a couple things here. Number 1 is a drill bit that fits through the pivot point. Okay, it doesn't drill, it just fits. Then we've got a spare piece of the rib material which goes through there. So that just gets everything lined up. And then what I do is squeeze that with a clamp and just insert thin CA right here. And as soon as I insert it, I will take another clamp, put it on there, and pull out the wood, pull out the drill bit. Let that cure. It cures pretty quickly. And then I will take this and just open up the areas that don't have glue on it, put a little bit of CA in there, and clamp it as soon as I get some CA in there. So that's how I install those pieces, and it works great. All right, now there is no real like step-by-steps here. So step 2 is glue those things on. Step 3 is do this, right? So basically we've done that. We've installed all the ribs, and now we need to glue the ribs, and we need to glue all the ribs before we do the trailing edge material. All right, so this is my process for gluing the ribs in place. So what I've done is I have put a piece of tape over top of my straight edge because it helps keep the glue off the straight edge, and we will lay the whole aileron assembly on top of the straight edge. And again, we'll need our magnets just as spacers. We can take this whole assembly and put it on here. Okay, so generally what I'll do at this point is I'm going to get my primary ribs glued on first. So that's going to be the edge ribs and some of these center ribs. So what I need to do is I just take some of these spacers. Now if I had 2 straight edges that were exactly the same height, that would be absolutely awesome. And I might buy another one of these levels, but probably not in time for this build. Now I'm putting some of the magnets on here. They're not magnetized to the straight edge. That's more just weight to kind of keep everything settled nicely. So now what I'll do is I'll take a, this is my plane. I use this on a regular basis as a square because this is a square surface. And I'm just going to check how the rib lines up. So that's nice and square. And the other thing I'm going to do is, before I glue these in place, I take my actual square, my little one, and make sure that the rib itself is square. I told you guys I would share everything with you, so basically right now the cutout for this rib isn't deep enough and the balsa is not sticking out past the rib itself. So what I'm going to do, I'll do this off camera, but what I'm going to do is flip this thing back over, take the balsa off, and I'm just going to deepen that little channel that I made previously, just so things get lined up a little bit better. All right, so all I had to do was open this up about 1 millimeter or so. So now we can reinstall. Okay guys, so I'm happy with position of this. What I'm going to do is just put a little drop of CA on there just to get it tacked, and then we'll double check the position of everything. Okay, so that one's done. Now we're going to move on to the other primary ribs. With this particular layout, I like to use the one that we bolted together because it's already nice and square. All right, guys, so I'll give you a bit of a different perspective here. And yes, even trusty bent screwdriver. If you're new to the channel, this is my most used tool in my toolbox. Even trusty bent screwdriver helps out when we're putting wood together. Okay, so we're going to do these ribs next. Now vertical, I think we're pretty stinking good there. Yep. So we're good there. We're just going to make sure they're square to the surface. So a little bit off. So when I glue this together, I just need to push it that way just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is get it in the right spot. We won't glue the whole way yet. We'll just do a little bit. A little bit of pressure. All right, let's check that. Perfect. Okay, so now with this one rib glued down, the other rib is bolted to it, so we're good there. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and glue both of these primary center ribs. All right, guys, and now we will go ahead and glue the last rib. So again, checking it to make sure that it is level and square, level plumb square. The reason I do the center part first is just because that is the area that is over my straight edge. Now we'll just double check it just to make sure. We're good. And good. And we'll glue the rest. All right, next thing we'll do is we'll glue the other two primary ribs here. I've put my square and stuff on there to make sure they're nice and straight, so we'll glue those. All right, so all the primary ribs have been glued in place. Now what I'll do is I'm going to go through and glue all of our balsa ribs in place. And with these ones, I'm just making sure as well that we are spaced out on the rear or trailing edge here the same. I mean, some of that's going to be determined by the bend in this piece of balsa on the rib. So on this side, the balsa's got a bit of a bend this way. So as I glue these, I'm just going to pull them back just slightly so they're lined up with the primary ribs. And on this side, we're kind of bent this way a little bit, so we're going to just tuck those forward just a hair. So I'm going to get all those glued in, and all of our rib gluing will be done. All right, guys, so all the ribs have been glued in. Now, one important thing about these PC-6 plans from MR Aeroworks is you really want to take a good look at both of the plans for the wings before you start. So on the plan that's labeled left wing, which is the one that we're using right now, it shows one of these A1 ribs being installed in the edge of the surfaces where the surfaces meet up. So this is the flap, this is the aileron. So your finished surface is actually this A1 rib. That's only shown on the left plan. It's not shown on the right plan. Well, it's possibly shown, but it's not described. Okay, so it doesn't tell you to do that, install that A1 rib, and it's also not depicted on the actual instruction manual itself. Important point. So I've installed the A1 rib here. You can do this, the A1 rib afterwards, or you can do it now, but we'll do it now. And we just tuck that one in, and we'll glue that, that rib in, and then all the ribs will be glued. All right, guys, all of our ribs are installed, and we do have the A1 rib at the end there installed. So next thing we're going to do is the trailing edge, which we've got here. So this is a 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch piece, I believe. Anyways, so we will put the surface on the edge of the board. We're butting this up so the control surfaces down below on the underside are resting against the edge of the board. And then what we do is we take magnets and install them along the entire length. Okay, so with the magnets there, basically the actual surface is nice and flush with the magnetic table, which is level, right? So there's almost 0 gaps now between the surface and the table. So now we take our trailing edge, and we'll just take a look at that and see which way works better. So not super straight, but we'll make it work. And now all we do is we just start at one end, and we just use some medium CA, spread it along here, hold it in place, use kicker, and we just work our way all the way down the surface. All right, so trailing edge is all glued on, so we'll pull the magnets off now. And sometimes, depending on how tight this was, it will stick to the plastic. There we go. So that's what the underside looks like, nice and flush. Yeah, it's awesome. When I look down the end of it, it looks great. So, all right, so next step is we have to skin the wings. This is 1/16 balsa, so we're gonna cut a piece to length. Then we're going to get it installed. Okay, so I've got my piece of balsa here. The first thing I wanna do is make one of the ends nice and square. So as I've talked about before, I will pick the direction that is the smiley face side, put that against the straight edge, and we are tight in the middle, and we've got about 1 millimeter or so gap on each end. So what I want to do now is on my cutting board, I'm going to lay the straight edge across, roughly flush with each corner, or really close, and we'll start off cutting almost nothing on one end, cutting more in the middle, and then cutting almost nothing on the other end. All right, guys, so the piece is all cut. Now, what I've done on this one is I actually cut this to width. The other ones I was leaving it long and either cutting it off afterwards or sanding it down. So on this one, I actually cut it to width. So I just took a scrap piece and tucked it around until it was a little bit long. And that distance there is 91 millimeters. So I've cut this piece to length, 91 millimeters wide, which is still too wide, but it's going to fit nicely on there, and we'll just have a little bit of sanding this time versus a whole bunch of sanding. So, all right, so step number 1, we're just going to check the length of it and position, and that all looks good. And then kind of the same thing that I did with gluing the underside to the ribs is I start with some of the primary ribs, whatever's easiest for me to hold on to, which is these guys here. And basically I hold down the base right there. And I'm just gonna put glue. Where's bent screwdriver? There he is. So I'm basically gluing these ribs from about here back. I'm just doing one at a time. So I'm gonna hold this in place. From the inside, I'm going to run medium CA along here to about there. And then I will spray a little bit of kicker in there and I'll hold it down. And then I just go along and I do that for every single rib to sheeting joint. All right, so we're all glued on the ribs, the flat part of the ribs, and now we're going to get to the angled part of the ribs and the cross brace. So what I do for this section is lay it on my build table, and I will roll the wing over, or the surface over, until we're flat with the cross rib. Now all I'm doing for this next step is I'm basically gluing the cross rib just in the center section. I want to try and avoid getting glue underneath the angled part of the rib. Reason being is when that cures, and when you go to do the rest of it, folding that over is really difficult. So I'm just getting this rolled over, so we're ready for the next step, which is going to be taking the rest of this piece and gluing it onto the angled part of the rib. So I'm just going to go down the wing and glue that cross piece in the center all the way across. All right, so you can see there now we've done about half the curve with gluing to the rib, and we're going to do the rest of the curve coming to the front edge where the leading edge glues on. So all I'm going to do now is bring the surface to the edge of my table, and we're going to put glue on these ribs here, the angled portion, roll it over, and use kicker to stick it, and we'll go all the way down the surface. So I'm going to start in the center, because when I glued the cross piece on the center, I avoided this entire area. So I'm going to put some glue underneath the cross brace, put it on the ribs going forward, and then we'll glue the center part, and we'll work our way outwards in each direction. All right, guys, so we've got a couple next steps here, but you can see that the top skin is glued on, and we don't have a whole lot of sanding to do on the leading edge. That's perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my pull saw and just cut off these extra pieces that are just sticking out and get that done. And then we need to cut the leading edge into two pieces. So the leading edge, essentially you've got a piece that starts on this rib right here and goes this direction. You've got a piece that starts right here and goes the other direction. So we'll just cut those two pieces out of the leading edge, and we have to have access to our control horn there. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is just take my sanding block, and we're going to sand the leading edge so we can get that top and bottom skin to match the profile of the ribs. Now all I'm going to do when I do this is I put my sanding block lengthwise, so it's at least hitting two ribs at the same time, and we just run it along the leading edge until our profile matches the ribs, and then our leading edge piece of wood can get glued on. Alright guys, so you can see there we have sanded the leading edge, and we are nice, and it fits really, really well. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take some wood glue, and we're going to put it on all the ribs and everything, and we will tape the leading edge into place on both sides of the opening here, and we will let that cure. And that is assembling an aileron of the PILATUS PC-6. Alright guys, and there is the finished glued on leading edge piece, and there's what it looks like. We do have a gap right there, the tape's just covering the gap for the control horn. So we're going to let that thing cure, and aileron is done. We just have one flap to do, this flap, and then we are done all the surfaces. Alright guys, last step we have to complete for the surfaces is sanding down the leading and trailing edge. So we've got all four of our surfaces. They've all got big blocks of wood on the leading edge and trailing edge. So I'll show you guys my process in shaping this stuff and how we go about getting our shape. Okay, so first thing I need to do is create a template for the leading edge. The trailing edge is a little bit more simple because you're just going flat across the bottom and flat across the top. So that one's a little bit easier. We're not going to make a template for that. But for the leading edge, we do, in my opinion, need a template. So on the right wing, we've got this nice diagram of the full flap section. Both surfaces have the same leading edge profile. So all I did is we need to get a trace of this area. So I put a piece of thicker G10 material down, which is opaque. Put the plans down. Paper goes over top, and then of course add some light. And it's going to be hard to see because I'm not pushing down on the paper, but trust me, you can trace it out like that. So once that's done, we ended up with this little template, which of course we can flip over and use on both sides. So all we do for this is I just hold the surface against the table, lay this down, and basically getting this bottom corner right here in line with the bottom of the sheeting. And then you're using the back side of the surface as your straight edge, and just use a felt marker and trace that out. So essentially what happens is on each side of the surface now we've got the profile of the leading edge, and that works on both sides. So now we have to begin shaping this. The easiest way to shape this is going to be using a plane. Now, not a plane like flying plane, but a plane. Now, I've got a couple different styles of planes. You've seen me already in the video use this one. I use this a lot for using as a little mini square, but it is pretty handy. The downside with this plane is it's only probably 1/2 inch wide, 3/4 of an inch wide. So when you're dealing with a surface like this, it would work initially, but not ideal. So what I find is the best plane for this is, I think this is made by Master Air Screw, right there. Uses like this razor blade type thing and works really, really well. It's really accurate, really sharp. Basically what you're doing with this is, all we're doing is getting rid of this material just so we're right past the black line. So we've got, we want to get rid of about that much material, and then the rest will be sanding. So there should be more plane work than sanding work, but there's still a fair bit of sanding work that you have to do to this, but most of your removal should be done with the plane. Now what you want to do with these outlines, it allows you to just look down the surface and get everything lined up and see how your shape is. That's how I do it. Just use my eye, and it works really, really well, and I've never had a problem with it. And then your final shaping is done with a sanding block. Enjoy the process. Enjoy getting all sawdusty and messy. All right, guys, so there is one of the surfaces just planed. So I did not do any sanding yet. You can see how much material you can get rid of, and there is very little sanding left to do. Did the trailing edge there as well too, just did the top section, which is this section where my thumb is wiggling. Anyways, yeah, so that's one surface done, and that's all the material that came off of it. So there's a fair bit of a mess. It's really more messy once you start sanding. So I'm going to do the next surface. All right, guys, so that's going to be everything for this episode. In my opinion, we accomplished a lot in this episode. So we made all the surfaces. We got the surfaces shaped, and I have just started sanding these surfaces. So If you have any questions, guys, make sure you list them down below. Hopefully you guys are finding the format of these videos detailed enough. I plan on continuing this type of format throughout the next videos. So I hope it's detailed enough for you. If for some reason you want more details, maybe ask for it, or again, list some questions down below. Very, very cool plane to build so far, and it's kind of rejuvenated me a little bit for building these kits this way. It's fun. So anyways, guys, in the next episode we are going to finish the aileron and flap surfaces and get them all basically completed, which is going to be a pretty quick process as far as the video is concerned. And then we will get into the building of the wing is my next big thing that I want to get accomplished. So it's going to be probably one wing in the next video, but we'll talk about the plans, some of the, not problems with the plans, but some of the things that we've encountered and things that you need to be aware of if you're building this plane with regards to the plans. So that's everything, guys. Thanks so much for tuning into this series of the MR Aerodesigns PC-6 Pilatus Turbo Porter build. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you in the next video.